Welcome to the Bad Business Podcast, where we don't pull punches. If it's shady, corrupt, or just straight up bad business, we're calling it out. From greedy CEOs to power-hungry city officials, nobody's safe here. Buckle up, because the truth doesn't apologize.
Okay, let's unpack this corporate meltdown that seems to be unfolding at a media company called BrandStar.
Right.
We've got a deep dive on our hands. It's sourced from the Bad Business Podcast episode, Whistleblower Wipeout.
Yeah.
And it throws us right into the thick of it through the experiences of Chris Kay. She's their former VP of Programming and Executive Producer.
Yeah, and what immediately grabs your attention here is, it's a firsthand account of a potential HR disaster. Chris Kay, she wasn't just managing some small corner of the business.
Yeah?
She was really at the helm of a substantial content operation. We're talking overseeing 21 local versions of pretty well-known national shows.
Like The Balancing Act with Montel Williams, designing spaces, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Inside the blueprint, too. So this suggests someone with significant responsibility and, real insight into how the company actually works.
Absolutely. And the central point of contention, like the core of what we're digging into here, is Chris's assertion that her termination wasn't because of performance issues. She claims it was a direct consequence of her whistleblowing, on which she alleges was, well, toxic behavior from a company co-founder and some seriously questionable business practices.
That's a heavy accusation.
It is. And it has potential legal ramifications, for sure.
It certainly raises critical questions, doesn't it, about the ethical climate within BrandStar and, frankly, the protections available for employees who dare to speak out against wrongdoing.
Yeah.
The podcast episode meticulously details this sequence of events that, if they're substantiated, paints a really troubling picture of corporate governance.
So let's start with the initial the formal complaint itself. According to the podcast, Chris lodged this formal complaint against Doug Campbell, one of BrandStar's co-founders.
Right.
And this wasn't just a casual chat. She accused him of verbal abuse, apparently triggered because she refused to falsify client contracts.
Wow. That's a pretty fundamental ethical line to cross right there, falsifying contracts. And the podcast, it highlights her emotional state when she went to HR, describes her as in tears, pounding the table.
Yeah, I read that.
That kind of vivid detail, it really underscores the intensity of the situation, suggests a pretty significant breakdown in professional conduct.
It wasn't a minor disagreement.
No, clearly not. It was something deeply upsetting that prompted her to take formal action.
Okay, but here's where things take a turn. And the podcast really paints this picture of alleged systemic failure. HR's response to this, intense complaint.
What was it?
Crickets. Silence. Complete inaction is the claim.
Huh.
And what's more, Doug Campbell allegedly began spreading misinformation, saying Chris had attacked his wife.
Okay, wait. How?
Well, the podcast even quotes Chris's actual text, which was apparently something like, "Do you verbally and emotionally abuse your wife too?" versus the narrative that was allegedly spun, which was much more aggressive.
So twisting the words. That alleged tactic of misdirection is unfortunately not unheard of. By shifting focus to some supposed interpersonal conflict, the aim could be to just discredit Chris, deflect from the main issue, the alleged abuse, and refusing to falsify documents. And it's worth noting, this alleged spreading of misinformation reportedly happened even before Chris submitted her formal written complaint the next day.
Which she did. She submitted that formal complaint, along with supporting evidence, a timeline, the whole thing.
Okay, so you'd expect some kind of investigation, right? Some due diligence.
You would think. But according to the podcast, HR allegedly handed her a case-closed letter right there in the middle of their conversation.
Mid-conversation? Seriously?
That's the report. It's hard to imagine a more dismissive response, really.
It's more than dismissive. That indicates a potential dereliction of HR's core responsibilities.
Totally.
A functional HR department, it should provide a neutral, objective process for investigating employee grievances. To just shut it down like that, prematurely, without even properly reviewing her information, it suggests either a predetermined outcome or just a blatant disregard for their own protocols.
And the reassurance they gave her afterwards about retaliation not being permitted.
Yeah, that sounds particularly hollow in this context, doesn't it?
Understandably, Chris pushed back. She demanded due process, asked for the company's official policy documentation.
Good for her.
And the podcast details what happened next as, alleged retaliation. She was put on 30 days of PTO, seemingly involuntarily.
Okay.
Her email access was cut off, And then, incredibly, she was escorted out of the office by security in full view of her daughter and colleagues.
Oof. That's very public, very humiliating.
Yeah.
The optics of that action are undoubtedly damaging. Regardless of the company's reason, escorting a long-term employee out by security, it just creates this perception of wrongdoing on her part.
And in front of her daughter.
Yeah, the emotional impact there is significant. But the way Chris reportedly found out she was actually fired, that's truly astonishing.
It really is. You ready for this? Not from HR, not from a boss.
Who then?
From her daughter.
Yeah.
Her daughter told her she'd been fired.
No. You're kidding.
Nope. It sounds like something out of a movie, but that's the account.
Wow. That alleged lack of direct communication about her termination, I mean, it just points to a severe breakdown in professional courtesy. Basic respect for an employee.
Yeah.
To let someone find out they're fired through a third party, especially their child, that's a major failure in management.
Yeah. And then there's the justification, right? The alleged reason for firing her.
What do they say?
The claim was that Chris violated admin leave policy.
Okay. Admin leave.
But here's the kicker, highlighted in the podcast. She was apparently never formally placed on administrative leave.
What?
No paperwork, no defined restrictions, no prior notification. It seems like a totally retroactive explanation.
Hold on. So if she wasn't officially on admin leave, how could she violate its policies?
Exactly.
That raises serious questions about the legitimacy of the reason they gave. That kind of inconsistency, it often suggests what lawyers call pretext.
Pretext.
Yeah, like a false reason given to mask the true motive, which might be unlawful retaliation in this case.
And the podcast really underscores the irony here by pointing out Chris's history. Apparently super dedicated.
How so?
Reportedly worked through every single PTO period for 4 years. Even did things like driving 3 hours at 3 a.m. for a nonprofit shoot for disabled athletes.
Must be so clearly committed.
Right. How does someone with that level of commitment suddenly get fired for violating a policy for a lease she wasn't even formally on? It just, It doesn't add up.
No, it really doesn't. It highlights a potential massive disconnect between, the company's expectations of employee dedication and its willingness to actually uphold fair treatment and due process.
Yeah.
And this also brings us to the broader context. The podcast suggests that this whole situation might be an attempt to cover up unethical sales practices. Remember her initial refusal to falsify contracts?
Ah, right. That
Yeah.
could be a key piece of this bigger puzzle.
Exactly.
And Chris wasn't some new hire they just had a problem with. She had over 16 years of working history with these guys, Doug Campbell and Mark Alfieri.
16 years, that's a long time.
It is. This isn't an isolated incident with someone new. And the podcast even delves into their history with previous companies,
Oh, like what?
like Tricom Pictures,
Yeah.
which apparently had a disturbing sexual abuse scandal involving an executive producer and one of Chris's own colleagues back then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And another company, O2 Media. Both reportedly had pretty bad reputations before they rebranded as BrandStar.
Okay, so this historical background, it provides really crucial context.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests that the issues Chris allegedly faced might not be isolated, but could indicate a recurring pattern of problematic management practices within this leadership group.
Yeah, the past scandals, the negative reviews, it raises serious concerns about the company's ethical foundations and how they've handled employee relations over time.
Definitely sounds like a potential pattern.
The podcast also touches on alleged inconsistencies in how employees were treated generally. Like, apparently other employees had commission-only pay structures offered, but Chris, even as a long-term high performer, supposedly didn't get that same offer.
Those kinds of disparities in pay and opportunities, they can really create a sense of unfairness and just undermine morale across the board.
Yeah.
It suggests maybe a lack of transparency, maybe inconsistent application of company policies. That stuff contributes to a toxic work environment.
And the way BrandStar allegedly responded after Chris raised her concerns seems to follow this pattern the podcast describes. First, she was cut out of communication.
Isolated.
Right. Then no real investigation happened. Her email got locked. She was fired without a clear explanation.
And
then, as the podcast puts it, she was just ghosted. Complete silence.
That alleged strategy of just silencing dissent is deeply troubling. It suggests an environment where raising legitimate concerns isn't just unwelcome, it's actively suppressed.
Yeah.
The whole progression, isolation, termination, then zero communication, it paints a picture of a company that maybe prioritizes self-preservation over accountability and ethical conduct.
But Chris, according to the report, she didn't just back down. She sent formal letters challenging her firing, demanded documentation,
Good.
and even got state-level human rights agencies involved.
Okay, so she's fighting back formally. That shows she understands her rights and is committed to pursuing due process, even when facing, significant opposition.
Yeah.
Going to external regulatory bodies like that, it underscores how serious her allegations are and maybe a lack of trust in the company's internal ways of solving things.
So, thinking about the key takeaways, from the perspective of the podcast hosts, what stands out? Firstly, they really emphasize the fundamental need for documented review of HR complaints.
Absolutely critical. You can't just dismiss it verbally. A robust HR process demands transparency, documentation. It protects everyone involved.
Right. It ensures accountability and provides a clear record, the complaint, the investigation, the outcome. Essential for both sides.
Couldn't agree more.
Secondly, if a company is going to put someone on admin leave, there absolutely has to be formal documentation, clear notification.
Yes. You can't just invent a policy violation after the fact to justify firing someone. That's a basic principle of fair employment. Employees need to know their status, any restrictions.
Lack of proper paperwork is a huge red flag.
Definitely.
And this is a critical legal point the podcast makes. Retaliation against whistleblowers, it's illegal.
Correct. Very illegal.
And it can lead to serious lawsuits.
Absolutely. Most places have specific laws protecting employees who report illegal or unethical activities. If Chris's claims of whistleblowing and then retaliation hold up, BrandStar could face significant legal trouble, not to mention financial repercussions.
And finally, the podcast makes this really compelling point about the cost of mistreating valuable employees. When your top performers are allegedly treated like this, it reflects badly on the entire organization, doesn't it?
Oh, hugely. Losing experienced, dedicated people because of alleged mismanagement and retaliation. It can have far-reaching negative consequences. It damages morale internally, makes it harder to recruit good people, and ultimately hits the company's reputation and maybe even its bottom line.
So where does things stand right now? The podcast reported that Chris has tried repeatedly to communicate with BrandStar since all this went down. Received no response, just silence.
That continued silence from BrandStar is, well, it's telling, isn't it?
Seems like it.
It could suggest they're unwilling to engage with her allegations, or maybe they just don't have a clear strategy for dealing with it. Either way, it doesn't help resolve anything or mitigate the potential damage.
So her next step, according to the podcast, is gearing up for legal action.
Makes sense.
Her most recent email, which also went unanswered, reportedly laid out this whole comprehensive list of grievances.
Like what specifically?
Okay, get this. The alleged retaliatory firing disguised as admin leave violation, the ignored complaints, and totally failed HR process, pressure to falsify network syndication info and sponsor involvement details, misleading statements made to potential clients, especially on LinkedIn apparently.
Wow.
And years of alleged unpaid labor. Things like underquota PTO she never took, lack of promised incentives or bonuses, revoked commissions, even broken partnership agreements. It's a lot.
That is a substantial list. The sheer breadth and detail of those alleged grievances, it suggests she's likely documented her experiences very carefully.
Seems like it.
And is probably building a potentially strong legal case. The claims range from, procedural failures all the way to allegations of seriously unethical, possibly illegal conduct that could expose BrandStar to some significant legal challenges.
And the irony, as the podcast hosts point out with almost painful clarity, BrandStar's company motto,
What is?
It's about the people.
Oh, the irony. That is stark.
The disconnect is almost satirical, right?
It's a perfect reminder that a company's stated values often don't line up with its actual practices. When the reality inside contradicts that carefully crafted external image, especially when it becomes public, it can cause huge reputational damage, erode trust, and that deafening silence in response just makes it worse.
Absolutely. The podcast pretty much concludes by suggesting that, look, with the detailed documentation Chris allegedly has and the company's continued silence, BrandStar should probably be prepared for a legal fight.
Yeah. It sounds like this story's far from over.
Indeed. This whole situation really serves as a powerful illustration, doesn't it? How mishandling employee complaints, alleged retaliation, how quickly that can escalate into a major legal and PR crisis for a company.
Definitely a cautionary tale.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the BrandStar situation, the core issue really remains this alleged retaliatory firing after whistleblowing and all the significant implications that come with it. It really compels you, the listener, to think about the absolute necessity of having strong ethical HR procedures. The huge risks companies take when they ignore legitimate employee complaints. And just a potential fallout from alleged unethical conduct inside an organization.
And this whole situation, it also prompts a critical question for you to think about. What does this series of events really reveal about a company's true values when it's faced with internal dissent?
Yeah.
And maybe what responsibility do employees have when they see similar things happening in their own workplaces? It's complex.
It is.
Chris K's experience, as reported, offers a really stark cautionary tale about the potential costs of speaking out, but also the critical importance of corporate accountability.